We are the Mississippi Economic Council, and we are the voice of Mississippi business in the state of Mississippi. We are, in fact, the state chamber of commerce for our state. Today, we're celebrating our annual meeting. It's an opportunity for business leaders and elected officials across the state to come together, collaborate, listen to what the issues we have in our state, and then start trying to figure out ways to where we can solve our current problems.
We are a nonprofit, privately funded association that represents businesses from all sectors of the economy throughout the state of Mississippi.
In really trying to make as good a business climate as possible, in trying to improve the legislative, the tax, all the different elements of making a good business climate.
What we did this year is we created the first part of the morning where we would typically have a single plenary session. What we did this year is we had 3 different topics that are very important to what we're working on with MEC's recently released report called Securing Mississippi's Future, Vision for Economic Growth. We have 5 areas that we're really trying to focus on. And of those 5 areas, all 4 of those were talked about today. 3 of them in concurrent sessions this morning, 1 in a plenary session at 10:30 before we had our annual meeting. And what that did is it allowed us to give our members an opportunity to think about where are my interests, where can I go to find out what's going on. And so far, the feedback has been tremendous that they had the opportunity to have that information available.
The topic of the workshop is Women Mentors, Drivers of Economic Growth, and it's important because in Mississippi we need to figure out ways to make sure that we have equitable opportunities to retain good talent in the state.
I work for TVA, which is one of the major utilities here in the state, and we have a group called Women Empowered, which works with our current staff, and we also go out into the communities and work with young girls to let them see that there are women in the utility industry and learn about some jobs that they may could have in the future.
Women mentors are invaluable, really, I would say, because they can help you get into places where you might not be able to get to yourself. They can help you navigate different challenging situations in your career path, and they can just help you excel in life, period.
We've seen more women in the pipeline for some of our careers. TVA has about 10,000 employees, and currently about 20% of those are women, which is high for the utility industry.
What's your recommendation to other businesses across Mississippi?
I think a female mentorship program is very important, especially some women who are just starting out in their careers where there could be some issues like not having a lot of mentors. There are some things that other women can do to help them and to also to get women and good qualified diversity candidates in the pipeline for jobs.
Our workshop today deals with cybersecurity, and this is such an important issue for the state. And a lot of people don't think about Mississippi as being a technology state, but I work with Innovate Mississippi, and we work with technology and innovation-based startups all around the state. And I can tell you that technology is a part of everything we do, from agriculture. We've got a company that uses a technology solution to move dirt. So we call it Dirt Tech. So really technology is a part of everything we do. We're all using social media. So we're particularly vulnerable to cyber threats in this day and age. So I think this workshop is really important. We've got some great panelists today that are experts in this field that are going to help share with us some tips and tricks we can be implementing to help keep our data safe.
I think the cybersecurity is probably the most serious situation that we deal with today. It is the crime that evolves the most rapidly, is the crime that has the most impact. It's also one of the crimes that's most difficult to detect. And so with those challenges coming onto the table, it makes it very difficult and becomes, again, a very serious threat within the state. When businesses or schools or other entities are attacked, there's a lot of negative impact that can be detrimental. The challenge with that is that detriment of the impact from those threats sometimes is not known for years. And so that becomes a problem. So it is very similar to a cancer that is slowly growing that you don't know is there. And then when it really becomes the worst, is too late to really be able to resolve. And so the things that are necessary are to be very diligent, to communicate, to work with agencies such as the FBI and other partners to report anything, that seems strange, whether it's the very slightest thing that draws your attention, to do regular checks such as maintenance, reviews on your systems, just to ensure that there is nothing there, that you're safe. I would say apply just like you would with your annual medical exams. Treat your security, your cyber situations very similar to that.
Today's topic is how to grow Mississippi's economy, and the main focus of that topic is going to be workforce development. And in particular for manufacturers, that's a huge area of interest.
This topic is growing Mississippi's economy, and it's about filling the job availability that we have in the state.
What is the current situation right now?
We've got plenty of jobs and not enough people to fill them. And it's a very competitive market, so the state's actively trying to determine how we can grow proficiency, skill level proficiency for underemployed persons as well as unemployed persons, as well as our emerging workforce.
Well, it's always been sort of a challenge, but obviously with COVID and those impacts and the upheavals in the workforce, that's made it even more challenging to find the right folks for the right positions, and also to make sure they have the skills that are needed for those jobs, especially the new in-demand jobs with high-tech manufacturing.
Obviously, education is the first thing anyone would tout to raise the skill level of any student or emerging workforce. Better education, better access to career paths that the student might not be considering. Many students don't know what they're well suited for, and so they give little thought into what kind of career they might ultimately wind up in. So the state's looking at things like the ACT Work Keys, an assessment to help a student understand what they might be well suited to do, as well as the ACT exam, which is a door opener for college and career path. So,
thank you so much. Appreciate that. That was good.
I think we've been sort of behind the eight ball as it relates to other states and how they operate their workforce development operations. But I do think we've made incredible strides over the last 2 years, especially with the formation of Accelerate Mississippi and the Office of Workforce Development.
When I started in the business of government back in the mid-2000s, every time we had a meeting about economic development, particularly about companies that were thinking about locating here, the first conversation that we had, and in many instances, the only conversation that we had back then, some 20 years ago, was about our state's incentives. What is the incentive package that I'm going to get if I decide to locate in Mississippi? And while I appreciate that's still important to individual businesses, I can assure you it is no longer the first or the second or the third or maybe even the fourth topic that we discuss in economic development meetings today. When we meet with prospective businesses, the first question is always, tell me about your workforce. Workforce is a major challenge, not only in Mississippi, but in every state across this country. And every business person, just like yourself, gets up every day wondering, am I going to be able to find an adequate number of people that have the right skills to be able to produce the product that I am producing and deliver it to the marketplace in a timely way. That's why I believe that the most important thing that we as a state can do, and there's a lot of things that we've got to continue to work to fix, but the most important thing that we could focus on from day one, even in spite of COVID-19, was workforce development and job training. We worked again with those same legislative leaders and passed the initial legislation back 2 years ago, which we've continued to improve upon as recently as yesterday when I signed a couple of those 3 workforce training bills into law. But I just want to recognize the work that is going on right now with Ryan Miller and his team at Accelerate Mississippi, our state workforce investment board, a board that Scott Waller serves on the executive committee of and helps lead the direction of the state. And the work that they are doing is making a real difference. As it was discussed yesterday in our press conference, Ryan very appropriately said that we have multiple customers for our Accelerate Mississippi product. We have multiple customers for our workforce development and workforce training efforts. You, the business people of our state, are an exceptionally important customer of those efforts. But perhaps more importantly, it's the 3 million Mississippians, our people, that we are investing in to not only try to provide a path towards a job, or in many instances a better job, but it's not just about providing a path towards a job, it's about providing a path towards a career that pays a wage much higher than what they're currently making, and a career that provides an opportunity for them to not only provide for themselves, but to provide for their families. When we signed legislation in 2020 creating the Office of Workforce Development, Accelerate Mississippi, I said then and I'll say again, it is imperative that we have someone, or in this instance, a group of someones, who wake up every single day thinking about how can we better invest in our people to provide those opportunities so they can provide for themselves. Accelerate Mississippi is doing exactly that. Ryan and his team are doing exactly that. And because of it, and because of the work of MEC and each and every one of you in this room, as well as our legislative partners, we now have a workforce strategy that is focused, one that is coordinated, and one that is well organized. And it also is one that leverages our resources efficiently and much, much, much more effectively. And the way in which we do that, as we've mentioned before, is we did it by recognizing on the front end that the best job training programs for potential employees on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and for potential employers on the Mississippi Gulf Coast are not one and the same for those training programs for those in the Mississippi Delta. And the best training programs for those that currently are living in Southwest Mississippi may or may not be exactly the same as those in Northeast Mississippi. And because of that, we did exactly what I promised to do back during the 2019 campaign, and we broke the state down in what we call our 8 ecosystems. We've already begun to have meetings with business leaders and providers of job training services in those 8 ecosystems to not only identify the types of jobs that are needed specifically in those regions, but also to specifically identify where we can find funding to meet the needs of the business community. I'm happy to say that the partnership with those communities at the local level are making a huge difference today, and the ecosystems that we have identified and the work that we are doing are going to make a huge difference for a workforce for many, many, many years into the future. We must recognize that while we should celebrate the fact that we have the lowest unemployment rate in Mississippi's history right now, we should celebrate the fact that our per capita incomes are up double digits over the last 2 years in Mississippi. We can't just simply celebrate and rest on our laurels. We must be willing to recognize the reason we find ourselves in that position and then continue to find ways to do even better.
I think the governor said this too. He said sometimes it is not always pretty, but the end result was amazing. Because the end result of our legislative session this year was vast improvements in how we're going to approach workforce development, vast improvements in how we're going to deal with transportation funding, vast improvements on economic development, vast improvements when it comes to our taxation. All of these things that are going to long term make such a big, big difference for us as we go forward. And the end result of that is going to be a stronger Mississippi 4, 5, 6, even 20 years from now. I really think it was a historic session because of the from our perspective at MEC, because the legislation that was passed was legislation we have been focusing on for years, and legislation we believe takes us much further than we've ever been able to go before.
You see the title on the board right behind me, Securing Mississippi's Future. It's our vision for economic growth. Now, we were able to release that back in February. And I think that we're moving forward because we were able to then match this plan with the top 5 priorities that MEC has as far as our strategic plan. And I want to touch on those top 5 here for just a minute. The first one is education, workforce development, and skills training. You heard the governor talk a little bit about that. What we want to do is develop a world-class workforce. And in order to do that, it requires training and education. Now, this job, there's some work that goes along with it, but there's also some things you get a chance to do that's a lot of fun. Last week, I got a chance to do one of those things that was fun. You heard Vicki Powell talk about the Star Student and Star Teacher celebration we had out at the Muse Center last week. Well, I had the opportunity to participate in that. Now, what really got my attention is the 320 students we had out there that we were honoring that day. We have some of the brightest minds in the state of Mississippi that you're going to find anywhere. Now, of those 320, 74% of them scored 30 or higher on their ACT. 74% out of the 320, 30 or higher. Now, that's a pretty good number. But the number that really got my attention was 26 of them had a perfect 36. Perfect 36. And then I found out later that there was 94 of them that was mad. You know why they were mad? Because they scored 35. They were 1 point away from a perfect score. Now, any of y'all who are, about my age, you remember Get Smart? He used to say, that close. Just almost there. Over a third of them were either had a perfect score or they were within 1 point of having a perfect score. Now, like I say, we got a lot of smart young men and women. All those are seniors. And I talked with some of them after the program, and it's no surprise that some of them, this fall are going to be attending college at Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Stanford and Vanderbilt. But the lion's share of that 320 and many others from their high schools are going to be going to school right here in the state of Mississippi. And they're going to go to some of our larger universities like Ole Miss and Mississippi State, Jackson State, and Southern. But I got to tell you, if you start looking for some of these students this fall, let me tell you where you're going to find them. You're going to find them at the Mississippi University for Women, admitting men since 1982. You're going to find them at Delta State University, Mississippi Valley State University, Alcorn, William Carey College, Belhaven, Millsaps, Mississippi College. And you're going to find some of them at one of the 15 members of the community college system that we have here in Mississippi, which is the best anywhere you'll find in the country. Now, what that tells me is that we've got a little bit of time, not a lot, but a little bit of time. In some cases, 2 years, some cases 4 years, some cases 5 or 6 years, depending on what type of education they decide to get. But at the end of that time, we as employers are going to have to be ready, because they're going to be looking for something, and we're going to have to be ready to offer it to them. Because if we don't have it, we're not ready to offer it, they're going to leave our state and they're going to go somewhere else. Now that brings me to the second priority, which is talent retention and attraction. Back in November at our board meeting, we had a panel, a virtual panel, where we had 4 young people from the state of Mississippi join us on a call, because they had all left the state of Mississippi, all of them in their 20s. But we wanted to know what motivated them to leave the state of Mississippi. Now, we also wanted to know what we could have done as a state that would have motivated them to stay. And then the third thing, we wanted to know what could we do as a state to motivate them to come back. Now, I won't get into all of the answers that they gave us to the issues, but they were great, outstanding. But let me tell you a little bit about the 4 participants. 1 Caucasian female, 1 Caucasian male, 1 African American female, 1 African American male. The Caucasian female had a degree from Mississippi State. Today, she is an environmental engineer at a big company out in Houston, Texas. The African American female has degrees from Mississippi State and Ole Miss. She's a PhD in biophysics, and she lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota today. The Caucasian male is a certified public accountant, works for a big firm up in Nashville, Tennessee. The African American male, well, he's not working yet because he was too busy being the president of the student body at Harvard University. Now you may say, well, that's just 4 people. Yeah, but to use a NFL pro football vernacular, those are 4 first-round draft picks. We can't afford to keep losing that type of talent out of our state. So we've got to be prepared. We've got to be ready. There's got to be something on the table when they finish their schooling to where we can hold on to them, because those are the type of individuals that can move the needle. And we really need them to be right here to help us move that needle. The third priority is infrastructure. You've heard a lot about it. I think we're moving in the right direction. I know that there was a lot of money that was allocated to fix our roads and bridges and other things. The third, economic development and business climate. We have to do things that are going to strengthen our existing businesses in this state, but then we've got to do things that's going to attract new businesses to come to Mississippi. And then the last thing is access to adequate and affordable health care. This is one that we cannot swing and miss on. We've got to make sure that our entire population has the opportunity to have adequate and affordable health care, because it is a workforce development issue. If you don't have a healthy workforce, you're not going to have a strong health workforce. So that's where we are, and we've got to move this forward. Now, I talked a little bit about our Securing Mississippi's plan. Those of you who know me, you know my military background. I have either written or I've participated in developing hundreds of plans across my military career. But the one thing I've said before, and I'll say again right here, a plan is worth absolutely nothing if it's never executed. Again, I encourage each of you to get a copy of our Securing Mississippi's Futures plan. Read it, because in order for us to execute it properly, it's going to take all of us moving in the right direction.
History sets the context for the future. MEC serves to promote businesses and economic opportunities. The success we've seen is a result of bringing together private sector leaders from all parts of Mississippi to achieve great things. This was the case when the organization was formed in 1949. It was the case 30 short years ago when my father Kenneth became chair in 1991, and is still the case today. I'm honored to be given the opportunity to serve as your chair. As the State Chamber of Commerce, MEC remains steadfast in continuing to improve Mississippi's competitiveness. As Leon mentioned, our Securing Mississippi's Future Vision for Economic Growth report will provide a roadmap for our future. This plan will provide a deliberate approach for implementing factual, data-based research to develop long-term solutions for creating economic opportunities for all of our citizens. I genuinely believe there is a renewed determination to make Mississippi better, and we are uniquely positioned to chart a new course for this great state. As Leon mentioned, we are already making strides in tackling some of the more crucial issues we face. While we were able to advocate for meaningful legislation that was passed this session, we know there's more work to do. We will continue to work together with the newly formed Accelerate Mississippi, our partners at the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, the Mississippi Economic Development Council, and others. The focus is to create a well-defined process for determining priorities and establishing performance indicators to measure progress. During the next year, we must continue to focus on providing opportunities for retaining and attracting talented individuals, as the General mentioned. This is critical to ensuring we have the skilled workforce needed for today and the future. And it is essential that Mississippi's business community lead this effort for us to help take Mississippi to the next level. Increasing engagement from business and community leaders in all regions to speak with a unified voice is vital to effectively addressing the key issues. With your support, we will continue to be bold and seize the opportunity to move Mississippi forward as we've never done before. We can strengthen MEC and make a meaningful difference in our state by working together. I'm excited to serve as the chair of the Mississippi Economic Council, and I'm excited about what the next year comes. Thank you so much for being here and for your support of the MEC.
I'm an old Eagle Scout, meaning I'm old and I'm an Eagle Scout. You always are one, right? But the motto of scouting is be prepared. How can businesses be better prepared for the next crisis as a result of what we've learned in this?
Well, don't forget the lessons that we've had to learn, right? It's really easy to think this is never going to happen again, but we already have things happening. We're in a global world now, and things happen all the time. We've just got a new report of this weird hepatitis for kids that's now starting to spread. I mean, there's always going to be these sort of threats from here on out. So please remember those challenges. Have a resiliency plan in Department of Health and Government. We have what we call a continuity of operations plan, and a lot of you guys probably have that. Think about operating in adverse circumstances, and then prioritize employee health and wellness. If with a healthy workforce, that's really where your operational productivity comes from.
Any business in the state of Mississippi should be a member of MEC, because what we do is we represent business interest as the voice of business in Mississippi in order to make sure we're focusing on the things that's going to make them be more successful, make sure they have a strong workforce, make sure they have the things in place from an infrastructure perspective, that they have the things in place from an economic development perspective to allow them to grow and to prosper. And that's what MEC's goal and mission is.
Our company has been a member since the very, very early days of the MEC. We find it very valuable. We feel like a rising tide lifts all boats, and we feel like as good a business climate can be in Mississippi, it will improve things for all of our companies.
How can people get more information?
Very simple, mec.ms.